Hi everybody, my name is Tommy Cuevas, your personal cloud engineer, and today I'm going to be talking about a sensitive subject, and that's data security within SharePoint. So I get this question a lot, especially with organizations that have a lot of security holes in their SharePoint environment. Generally, when people start working within SharePoint and they're not familiar with how permissions are set up on that, what they normally do is give permissions as an as-needed basis. So basically, they're going into document libraries or SharePoint sites or documents themselves and clicking the share button and adding people as needed. And the problem with that is if that person doesn't need access to that data anymore, you have to remember everything you gave them permissions to. The easiest way to handle this is by dictating permissions in SharePoint based off of Entra ID Security groups. And I'm going to break this down for you. I'm going to show you how it's done. And once you kind of see how it's set up, it's way easier. And one of the use cases of this is especially if people are changing roles in your organization. So say, for instance, Bob is part of your HR team and he's moving over to IT. Well, you don't want him to still have access to all that HR information, but you want to give him permission to all the IT information. Instead of having to remember, all right, he's got permissions here, he's got permissions there, all that stuff, you can easily move them from one security group to another. It removes the permissions that they don't need and gives them the permissions that they do need. And I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that right now. So the first thing I have to do is I have to log into my Microsoft Admin Center, and that's easy enough. All you have to do is go to admin.microsoft.com, and it's going to pull up this page right here. From here, all I have to do is go into Teams and Groups. And I'm going to go to Active Teams and Groups, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and click on Security Groups, since this is going to be a security group within my SharePoint environment. All I have to do from here is click on add a security group, and what I do, and you can change it however you want, everybody's got their own naming convention, but whenever I'm building out SharePoint security groups, I always start with SPO for SharePoint Online. This way I can go ahead and easily sort what are security permissions for something else and what security permissions are for SharePoint Online. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this HR Owners. Now, there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. A, I can easily add this group to the SharePoint site itself, dictating that these people are owners of the site. This way they can edit the site as needed, they can change permissions, they can delete and recover information easily. But I'm going to go ahead and create this security group, and I'm going to say SPO HR Owners for Site. All right, so I'm going to click on Next. I'm going to go ahead and click on Create Group. Close, and there it is. So I'm going to click on the SP Owners group because I want to add somebody to it, and really I'm the only guy in this tenant, so I'm going to be adding myself. Click on there, go to members. I'm going to click on view and manage all members, add members again, and there I am, since I'm the only person in here. Click add, and now I've added myself to the security group. My next step is I'm going to add the security group underneath the owners group in my SharePoint environment. I know that sounds very confusing, but I'm going to break it down for you. So my next step from here is I'm going to go to my SharePoint Admin Center. The easiest way to go is from my Admin Center here, scroll down a little bit. If you do not see this, go ahead and click on the Show All button. I'm going to click on SharePoint. This is going to bring me to my SharePoint Admin Console. Now, the unique thing about SharePoint is it actually creates 4 security groups internal to SharePoint for every site that you create. Well, I'm going to go ahead and go to Active Sites, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go ahead and click on the name HR Portal because I'm going to be giving permissions to this HR Portal. And from here, this is how you change some settings within your SharePoint site for the HR Portal. But I'm going to be focusing on membership. Now, as you can see, we have a couple of different groups in here. We have an admins, an owners, a members, and a visitors, and each one of them have different permissions, kind of like pre-canned permissions. In this case, admins is an invisible group. You cannot see this group from your SharePoint site. The only groups that you can see from that SharePoint site, and when we get into permissions, you'll see it, is you have your site owners, site members, and site visitors. Site owners have Mac Daddy access. They can do whatever they want. They can recover files, they can delete files, they can rearrange the site as needed, they can add to the site, they can remove things from the site, and they can dictate all the permissions that they need. Members have edit rights, so they're able to edit anything that is hosted within that SharePoint site, so documents, things along those lines. And then visitors only have read access. They can't edit anything. This is where I normally tell people to have all their employees set up. This way they're able to access the information on the site, but they can't edit any of the documentation or delete any of the documentation. Well, I'm going to go ahead and add that SPO group to my owners because they're going to be owners of the site. So click on add site owners and I'm going to look for SPO. Like I said, it makes it really easy to find all your SharePoint groups. Click there, add, and now I've given site permissions. I've said basically anybody in this group now is an owner of this SharePoint site. So now that I have that set up, now I'm going to go ahead and create a secure document library within that HR portal. So I'm going to actually go to the HR portal. And here I am. I'm at my HR portal for my SharePoint. And what I want to do is I want to create a new owners document library. So this is for only owners of the site. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and click on my cogwheel at the top right hand side. I'm going to go to site contents. Now SharePoint usually consists of two different layers. You have your site, which is going to be your user experience, your UI, how people are going to access this data. And then you have your site contents, which is pretty much the back end of your SharePoint site. And as soon as we click on there, we've got a couple of different sites set up. I mean, a couple of different document libraries, pages, things like this. This is how you access all that information. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create this document library for owners only. So I'm going to click on new. I'm going to click on document library, and I'm going to just start from blank. I'm going to say owners only. That's going to be the name of it. And it's going to say, hey, do you want to show this in the navigation bar? Now, the cool thing about setting up these document libraries and setting up these permissions is if you do not have access to this document library or site or list or whatever you put in here, and you still click on show in navigation, if people aren't part of the permissions, they will not see this in their navigation bar. So I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to click on create, and what it's going to do is it's going to create this document library for me. Now, I'm in my document library. It automatically refreshes that you're there. But right now, what it's doing is it's inheriting the permissions from the site. So whoever has access to this site has access to this document library. But I want to knock it down that only the owners have access to this document library. So the fastest way to do that is by clicking on the cogwheel, once again, on the top right-hand side. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go to site permissions. I'm going to go to library settings. And this is specifically for this document library. If you go to site settings or site permissions, it's going to dictate the permissions for the site as a whole. People do that all the time. They mess it up. They remove everybody from having access to the site. But this way, you go to the document library settings. So we're going to click on more settings, and what we're going to focus on is permissions and management. So underneath permissions and management, you'll see permissions for this document library. Click on there. So I tell people all the time, if there's a yellow banner, there's a reason. And this reason, I always tell people, always read what's in the yellow banner. And in this case, it says this library inherits permissions from its parent. And it tells you exactly what the parent is. In this case, it's the HR portal. But once again, I only want owners to have access to the site. So what I have to do is break inheritance. So right up here, I say stop inheriting permissions. It's going to pop up saying, hey, you're creating unique permissions for this. Are you sure? I just press OK. Now, the nice thing is if you mess this up, all you have to do is click on delete unique permissions. It's going to re-inherit all those permissions from the top level site, and you can start from scratch. But in this case, I want to get rid of the members group, and I want to get rid of the owners group. I'm sorry, the visitors group. So I'm going to click on both those check marks. I'm going to click on remove user permissions. I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to only have owners have access to this site. It's going to refresh, and it's going to tell you, hey, now only the owners have access to this SharePoint site. And if you're concerned about that, what you can do is click on check permissions, and you can put either a user or an owner or a group or whatever you want in here. So in this case, I want to see if I have permissions to this. It's going to say, hey, there's my name, Thomas Cuevas. I'm going to click on check now. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, hey, you have full permissions because you're part of the HR portal owners group. So that means you're fine. I have permissions. I have full control. The weird thing is it still says deny on some things, just so you know. That is kind of a remnants of old SharePoint Online. There's not really a deny within SharePoint. You can only give permissions. So in this case, hey, that all looks good. And I have now secured my document library for only owners. Only owners have access to any documents in here, this document library as a whole. And for anybody that's not an owner, this will not show up. So this is only for people that are owners. I hope you found this video educational and helpful in your SharePoint journey. Once again, my name is Tommy Cuevas, your personal cloud engineer. I hope you have a wonderful day. Be good to yourself and be good to somebody else.